You're listening to the Lou Stokes Podcast. Real and inspiring conversations with individuals from all over the world, sharing their insights on sustainability, fashion, conscious consumerism, and empowerment. Be inspired to take action and be the change you want to see in the world. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lou Stokes Podcast. I'm very excited and honoured to have Victoria Jenkins on today with me. Victoria is a designer and a disability advocate. Welcome, Victoria. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and some of your background?
It's always like a two-parted story because I have to give context. So I studied fashion design, graduated a horribly long time ago in 2008 into a recession. So that was fun. And then I worked initially as a pattern cutter and then became a clothing technician. I mean, it's not called a garment technologist in the industry, but it's like a clothing engineer, how things fit, how they're made, where fastenings go. And I did that for suppliers to high street and then eventually worked with brands. And in the background behind all of that, in 2012, I had an undiagnosed ulcer that burst and I had some life-saving surgery. And then that led to lots of things being diagnosed, lots more surgeries. And it was whilst in hospital that I had the idea for Unhidden, which is a socially responsible adaptive fashion brand, thanks to a conversation with a patient, basically. And it kind of changed the course of my career and my life.
Right. So tell us a bit more about Unhidden, because I've been following you for a bit and I'm fascinated and really inspired by what you're doing. And to be honest, like when you start to scratch the surface, there isn't really anything like what you're doing. So yeah, tell us a bit more about Unhidden before I waffle on.
It's my baby. So Unhidden, I had the idea for in 2016, but we've been trading since 2020. I had the first ever photo shoot in that small window of time we were allowed to mix in September 2020. So adaptive design is specifically for people with disabilities. So it might be trousers that are made for a seated position for wheelchair users, or all of the shirts in my range have openings so that if you're going through chemo or radiotherapy or you have diabetes or a permanent medical line, you can access your arm without taking your clothes off. And then there's, just other accesses for people who have stomas, people who have permanent catheters or feeding tubes, just to give them a bit of style and dignity back, because historically anything that has been adaptive has kind of been designed from like a nurse's or a doctor's point of view, not from the patient's point of view. And while Unhidden's not the first adaptive brand, but we have done quite well in the last 2 years with awareness raising and campaigning for more brands to do inclusive design. But yeah, it's in the UK, we're quite far behind. In the States, there's hundreds of designers, and the same in Australia and New Zealand. So we've got a lot of catching up to do, but there's a group of us that are super passionate about doing this and making other brands do it too.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And I think it's so important that, like you said, looking at it from the patient's point of view, and actually, being able to feel like you can wear nice clothes and stylish clothes, because clothes are fun and everyone should be able to have access to them.
Yes.
And so I think, I guess you get a lot of great feedback from people that, have certain disabilities. And
we do.
What's the general feedback that you tend to get from them?
Some of it has been sort of more from the representation side. It's just, they finally feel like they're seen and understood, and that, they wish they'd had it, sooner. And from the fit and the clothing perspective, very much the same, just that suddenly everything got easier, rather than sort of getting dressed being a fight and a struggle, it was something they could look forward to again. And I think it just, it blows my mind. There's, 1 in 4 now, I think, is the stat. It's been updated. It used to be 1 in 5 in the UK and 1 in 4 in America, and now it's 1 in 4 in the UK too, is disabled. So that's a lot of us, like 20% of the global population or higher.
Yeah.
And, like myself, 80% of us aren't born with our disability. We acquire them. And then, that's in some cases overnight, people can't wear their entire wardrobe. And we're very much sort of trapped into this, this idea that we only wear casual wear and leisure wear. And that's because that's been the only thing that we could wear. You know, it's because we didn't have the choice to wear things that we wanted to. And it's been a barrier for people going for job interviews. You know, if you can't dress for a job interview, you know, you're not going to get hired. And that patient that I met on the ward, she said, you know, just at home, at going out for parties, going to work, she was just constantly in a uniform of T-shirts and jogging bottoms that she just didn't feel like herself. And I think when we're already feeling, you know, maybe a bit low mentally because of our disabilities and our conditions, the last thing you want to also feel is that your identity has been taken away.
Yeah, and in like facing obstacles that you shouldn't have to face. You know,
well, I mean, legally we can't leave the house naked, so it's, you know, we have to put clothes on. But you know, I don't think people always sort of grasp. But what if you know, even just putting underwear on? What if you can't do that? You know, and then getting dressed into other things, getting shoes. You know, it touches every single part of our lives, and I think it's sort of a bit unforgivable that it hasn't been as mainstream as it needs to be up until this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like you said, if the stats have really changed as well, like why aren't people addressing these things? I feel like the fashion industry is really slow adopting the like diversity and inclusion, which is kind of interesting because it's like, hang on a minute, fashion in itself it's creative and expressive, and it's meant to be diverse.
Yes,
And
yeah,
like
exactly. It's, you know, there's such a great vehicle for change sometimes, but it still seems to be the last taboo. You know, I think brands are afraid of it. I think designers, when it's explained to them, I think sometimes they actually get quite excited about it, but there's still that fear of what if I get it wrong or I don't know what I'm doing, so they just don't do it.
Yeah, they keep quiet and they just look the other way. Do you have
Although,
brands?
as I said to someone quite high up yesterday in fashion, I was like, the silence is deafening at this point. You can't be scared anymore. You've got to start trying to be inclusive because you're late. Like, you haven't got the time. You haven't got the luxury of putting it on your plan for next year or the year after or 10 years down the road. You need to start now.
Yeah, and how do you feel like people respond to that?
I think I'm very bolshy when I say things like that. And I'm always like, well, where did I get the audacity? I think they do, you know, I think they can see it. I think there's a lot of education that needs to go into it. You know, the more you think about it, it isn't just about designing with inclusion in mind and adaptive fashion. It's who are you hiring? Who's in your head office? Is your head office accessible? You know, do the disabled and chronic sick community, do they feel welcome to apply for fashion jobs? Probably not. So, you know, can they even study it? Can they get into the universities that teach fashion design? Again, probably not. A lot of them are very old buildings. So, you know, we need to literally change architecture as well as attitudes before we're going to have any kind of shot at equity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like there needs to be a mindset shift all on every level. And people need to be able to have the access to actually go and study, for example, fashion design, no matter what. They need to be able to have that opportunity and not feel like, or even if there is that opportunity offered, they need to feel like that they're accepted and included and feel comfortable within the environment. It's all well and good putting that you do something, but if you're not really living it and breathing it, then it's not. Nothing's going to nothing changes.
Exactly. And, like, you know, I think there's so many opportunities for like learning. When you make things more accessible, everyone benefits. You know, it's only a good thing. It doesn't take anything away from anybody else to do it. And yeah, you know, historically we're all kind of made to feel like it's, you know, it's extra to have a disabled person. You know, it's either more money or it's too hard or we just don't want to do it. And then, you know, then it's kind of the onus is put on the disabled person to advocate for themselves. And we're all pretty exhausted from doing that, you know. So we need the, you know, the non-disabled community to really get on board with us now.
Yeah, absolutely. What challenges have you faced with Unhidden?
Oh, so many. I mean, when I had the idea in 2016, it was, and also because I wanted it to be sustainable, and sustainability wasn't really a buzzword then either. So it's been sort of getting people to understand the size of the market, the scale of the problem. and it's not a problem, it's a creative solution, something that we can absolutely fix. So it's been difficult to change the attitude. There's been a lot of people, when I first started talking about it, they were like, I don't think it's really needed. Or if they needed it, they'd already have it, was a comment on a newspaper article once. And we quite often use the stat, there are more people making clothes for dogs than for people who are disabled, which is still a true stat. And someone came back with, well, there's more dogs. I was like, no, actually, there are 13 million dogs. There's 16 million disabled people. But also, disabled people can't grow their own clothes, literally, on their body.
Yeah.
So, it's been quite difficult to face a lot of attitude that it's not needed. And then, being a disabled entrepreneur comes with its unique challenges. I wouldn't have it any other way now. I was saying to a friend last night, actually, I've ruined myself for working for other people because I've been my own boss for so long now that I couldn't imagine going and working, 9 to 5 for someone else. I still do consulting, but I just couldn't imagine doing it now. So it's been managing my health alongside, a startup, and sort of really fighting that hustle culture, because you feel like you need to be showing up every day. When there's an article about adaptive fashion, you feel like you must comment on it and share it and tag all the other people that you know in the space. And it's because the conversation is getting louder now, it's impossible actually to keep up with all the momentum, which is great. But now I've kind of, after 3 years solidly working on Unhidden sort of solo, I now finally have a very small team, and I can start handing over tasks. But I struggle with the delegation. I am terrible at that, because it's just been mine for so long, But
it's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard. It's really hard. And then, you kind of quickly discover everyone's making it up as they go along when it comes to entrepreneurship and small businesses.
Winging it.
There's not, and it's something I've lost I used to be really scared of sharing anything in case, well, not in case anyone stole it, but in case it wasn't good enough, Whereas now I'm like, what, you can change your branding if you need to. I'm quite committed to mine now, so it's okay. But it's had a few iterations that all just got archived, So it's going from full pelt to now trying to scale back, and because it's not sustainable to work at the pace that I have.
Right.
But equally now things are getting really exciting, so it's really hard to say, okay, I'm going to step back a little bit now. You can't really do that, And I think actually one of the main struggles, and it's it's not unique to Unhidden, it's to any startup really, but specifically disabled entrepreneurs, especially female led, has been getting investment. That has taken a really long time, and as some people may have seen my Dragon's Den pitch, they didn't go for it, but thankfully people who saw it have. So it was,
amazing.
Yeah, that was a good experience. But it's been very difficult to relentlessly pitch this for months really, and sort of get nowhere. And then something just clicks, and once one person goes, it's like a load of them turn up. So but it is difficult. Like the financial side of it, I'm trying to work and earn money as well as run Unhidden it's been a struggle, but
it's challenging. Yeah, and it's like you said, it's like, obviously when you've got your own business and you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, it's really hard, because you do everything. Like you're a jack of all trades, aren't you? You're just doing everything.
I think it's good because then you kind of have an understanding and an appreciation when you hand it over. You know what that person's got to do. Like doing the packing and wrapping and pitching and tidying up the office. You have to do everything. You have to pitch in, and then you kind of just get to say, "Oh, thank goodness, now that's your headache, not mine." Especially the social media, because I've been trying to run, like my Instagram channel and Unhidden's. So there's 2 Instagrams, there's 2 Twitter accounts, there's LinkedIn, there's TikTok, there's Facebook, and you're just you can't. It's not possible to run 10 social media accounts at the same time and expect them to get anywhere. So very glad now that I have social media help. It is just creating the things is a full-time job. Sharing it is a full-time job. And then that's, I'd probably spend the least time doing the one thing I really want to do with Unhidden, which is designing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that happens to us all. We end up entrepreneurs coming a social media expert.
I don't remember signing up to have to do all this. And with TikTok in particular, I was like, I've got to do reels. I've got to lip sync to things. I have to learn dances now. This doesn't feel relevant. So I've not really done very much because I'm terrible at that. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you have no money. Social media becomes the free tool to get that traffic and that advertising. So it's really hard.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pressure of like you have to do it like consistently, and like you should be posting every day, and then you've got to do stories, and it becomes like this added pressure that's just, I think, I mean, obviously social media is amazing, but sometimes it can just become this massive headache. And I think it's about finding a balance for each person. Like you said, now you're able to give it to someone else to help you. It does take a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah, so it's quite funny though. Like I keep seeing stories. I'm like, I didn't post that. I'm like, oh, that's because she is. I'm like, oh, that's why that's there. So it's nice to sort of to see it. It's a beast, social media, but it's also it's where I've really found community, and it's where I know a lot of the disabled and chronic sick community. Without that, we wouldn't have people to talk to necessarily. And lockdown, I think, was the experience everybody else got to have. Like that's how we normally communicate, is online anyway, and we've been doing it for years. So it was kind of nice almost to have all these other people come in, and then you find, obviously as lockdown sort of ended, not that the pandemic has ended, despite what people might think.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a lot of the community has kind of suddenly gone offline again. Everyone's, so joyful about meeting up in person, which obviously is important. But it's kind of, we need that reminder to non-disabled people to like, don't forget us. So like events still need to be hybrid. But I think quite a lot of people are keeping things hybrid and remote working. I think, there's some good that came out of it after a lot of bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like now a lot of people have shifted in the way they do things, and what they thought couldn't work before, they were forced to make it work. And
that's the thing. Like that was one of the reasonable requests that I used to ask for at various brands, was the ability to work from home, and they were like, no, can't do it. And then suddenly the whole world had to do it, and you're like, well, it turns out it was possible.
Yeah, again, it's just their mindset. We've always done it this way. It doesn't work if you're not here. And it's like, well, why doesn't it? Like, have you tried? But it's just that fixed mindset of like, no. Yeah. But how do you manage your, like, your, apart from obviously your physical health, but your mental health with like your business? Is there, do you do?
I wouldn't say that I do manage it very well. I think, I do try and remember to sort of meditate. I do a lot. I read a lot. So that's, for me, switching off and having a bath. At the beginning of this year, because, in the run up to Fashion Week, it wasn't possible to have the breaks that I needed. So I kind of brought back in, sort of ring fence my Wednesdays again, so that they're my rest days. So that's kind of, physically and mentally. On a Wednesday, I kind of say to everyone, I'm off all comms. Don't contact me. We don't do anything. We don't talk about work. Invariably, I break that rule myself, but I do try and at least stay at home on Wednesdays. And because this week I had to come in for a meeting, I therefore left a bit early yesterday. I'm going to finish early today, although I actually have a 7 p.m. call, so it's with the state.
It's kind of hard
but I'll be doing it from home. So I've actually, now that I've got an office space as well, that has been a huge change. There is a separation, whereas before I would just be working because I was sat there, so I'd just keep going. I think like the first night when I came home from the office and everything was here, I sat on the sofa and was like, well, what do I do with myself now? I was like, I don't know what to do if I don't let myself do work. So it's been it's been a bit of a change after, being operating at my basement flat for, well, even before Unhidden, like I was freelance. So, I quite often was working from home, even before, well before COVID. But having my own space to come to has been quite good mentally, to have that separation, because otherwise, as we've all found out, we all overworked ourselves during lockdown because we had nothing else to do. So we did nothing but work, really.
Yeah. Oh God. And then everyone came out of COVID burnt out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately what I've done. But it was also, I had more energy because I wasn't physically being made to, commute anywhere or go anywhere. Yeah. I had more energy. The commute was from bedroom to living room. It was great. But then it was also, you end up working weekends. You're like, oh, I'll just get ahead of the week. And you're not getting ahead of the week. You're just working more days of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. It's not you're getting ahead. Yeah. But just to track back, you mentioned about London Fashion Week. Tell us a bit about that, because I believe that you were the first adaptive fashion brand to
be a member of the so to be a member, well, yes and no. So it's the first adaptive fashion brand to join the British Fashion Council and the first adaptive brand to have a solo runway show, I think globally, but I don't want to be held to that because they have done some in the States, but they did them as a collective. So I just wanted once for it to just be Unhidden, not shared with anyone else. But London Represents do host shows in Fashion Week, and there have been different, I think it's the Real Catwalk. They do that, I think, off schedule, so there are a few. But yeah, it was a very powerful moment. 29 models across, age, ethnicity, size, sexuality, gender, ability. It was, an incredible moment. I still cry when I watch the show back.
Oh, that's amazing. It must be like such a powerful moment, like to see how far you've come and being able to represent.
Yeah. I mean, it was always, Unhidden. Thankfully now I can start to separate myself from it a bit because I don't want to be the mouthpiece. It's meant to be about the community and the people.
Yeah.
I really fought for the end of the show. Everyone said, why don't you do a walk down the catwalk? I was like, absolutely not. It's not for me. But I had to come out, and thank, our amazing partners. So I just sort of did a thank you to the partners and then I ran away. I kept it very brief. But yeah, it was, I still, it's still now sort of hearing, the models. We've got a WhatsApp group, well, not a WhatsApp group, an Instagram group, and hearing like their excitement in the run-up, but also how they felt since and what they've all gone on to sort of do. And some of them have had amazing press coverage themselves in their hometowns because not everyone was from London.
Right.
So yeah, it's been lovely. And some of the messages that we get over social media or even over email, there's some of them are heartbreaking because they're like, my mum would have really loved this. She had cancer and she couldn't dress how she wanted to, and it was really sad. And I'm like, I'm sorry it wasn't there for your mum.
Yeah.
But people have been incredible, and I think the impact of that sort of continues on. It's just now I want to do it again, but they are very expensive to put on. So whether I do another one this year remains to be seen. But we are showing on the June schedule, as part of Models of Diversity, are doing a runway show with a load of brands. So I'll be one of the brands that takes part. Amazing.
And were people open to modeling for you? They were happy?
Yes, people, it was, so I think only 2 or 3 of them had actually sort of gone down a runway before. The rest were either people that I've been trying to sort of cultivate friendships with over the years. Some of them were just fellow disabled entrepreneurs, and I was like, do you want to have a crack at this? And yeah, no one said no. It was lovely. And then since then, now we get daily requests, can I be part of your next campaign? Can I be on your next runway? So I'm kind of like, I'm not an agency, so I keep saying, well, yes, but you can go and sign up to this agency, or email this person and we'll put you on a list. And we're literally sort of slowly building, a big spreadsheet of just people that want to do it. Because I really, there's some models I've worked with a lot and I absolutely adore them. But I do want to work with, I don't want to use the same faces every single time because then, then I'm not being inclusive either. But it's really hard when some of them are so awesome. You're like, oh, let's just do it again.
Yeah, of course. And how do you feel, Victoria, that, do you feel like the fashion industry is slowly becoming more diverse and inclusive? How are you feeling right now about?
I don't know. I'd say yes and no. I think those of us that are operating in this space, we're making it more inclusive, but I think people that haven't are not converting. So there's still, a really long way to go. I think, there's still brands that sort of get celebrated if they use one disabled model in a campaign or on a runway. I'm like, that's one person.
Yeah.
And they do it one season, they don't do it the next. They don't continue to build on it and have them every single time, which is something that I really, really want to see happen. I actually really want there to be a mandate that any brand showing in Fashion Week, 1 in 5 models has to have a disability, visible or otherwise, because if we don't mandate it, I just don't have any faith that they're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And also like with workforces, you know, within the industry, like I'm not sure of stats, but I wonder how well represented disabled people are
Well,
within like
it's interesting you say that. The stats and the data, it's very hard to get data because that relies on people feeling safe enough to disclose that they are disabled. So there's probably heaps of us working in jobs and their bosses don't know and wouldn't say anything, so they don't know and they don't feel safe to say that they are, in case they lose their job, don't get that promotion or get treated differently. So trying to collect the data is a problem in itself. But, you know, I mean, definitely, there's no denying we're less likely to be employed. I think it's something like, I don't know, 50% less likely. Don't quote me on that. But we're definitely, you know, the disability employment gap is massive.
Yeah, have you experienced with any brands when, you know, before you were with Unhidden, that they were like...
Yeah, a few. I mean, some of them were absolutely amazing. I will do a shout out to Jack Wills. They were incredible. They did, you know, like I had an occupational therapist, they gave their recommendations and then they followed those recommendations. So they were really, really amazing. And then some were, you know, less amazing. It depended. Sometimes it was the people, not the job itself, that was the problem. And sometimes it was the hours of the job that was a problem, or even just the commute. In fairness, Jack Wills, the commute, that was my longest commute. So they would let me stay, they'd let me go in later so that I didn't have to stand up. I'd definitely have a seat and sort of finish early, but I would make up those hours, you know, where I could. And if I couldn't go in, and they let me have a VPN link so I could still work from home. So, you know, they were good. There have been places that were bad. And not because, you know, I was behind on work or anything was delayed. They just physically needed and wanted someone to be physically in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah. They were stuck in that
for no reason. I was like, but, you know, am I behind on the work? No. Am I behind on any deadlines? No. In fact, I've gone above and beyond to prove that, you know, any time off that I have isn't a problem. And I think there's a few people asked me to delay or move surgeries and things. Like it's been a very mixed bag. But I think, you know, in some of their defence, I was so determined when I first became ill that I was going to get back to normal, whatever that meant for me. So I was really fighting, you know, this label and the idea that I was sick. So I, you know, invariably ended up making myself sick. Anyway, I think before I went freelance, almost every single year, I would medically burn out and end up being in hospital for 10 days, just fully exhausted. I think the last time it happened, I actually took my laptop to the hospital and the nurses were like, is that the thing you need to be doing? I'm like, I'll just panic if I don't do it. You know, you get really anxious. You know, in the slightest, any meeting, like with anyone, when they're like, can we have a chat? I'd be like, right, this is it. They're going to get rid of me now. You know, and because that had happened. So it was very anxious, like having a day off or asking for time off. And yeah, not all of them were great about it. Some of them were, some of them weren't. But I think, you know, that's true of, some of them were proper The Devil Wears Prada and some of them were really, really lovely.
Yeah, like you said, I guess as well, it's going to depend a lot on the people, and like who's the manager or, you know, of a certain team or whatever. It's going to depend a lot. But I feel like there's such a lack of understanding what diversity and inclusion actually means. It's not just having one person out of 5 in your workplace with a disability or, you know, whatever. It's actually means a lot more than that. And I think a lot of brands, they just put it on their website, but they don't actually
they'll put it on their website, but they won't have like alt text, so people with screen readers can't see any of the images, or they won't put captions on their videos, so people who are deaf or hard of hearing can't follow the conversation. So, you know, I think people kind of forget digitally there is a way of excluding people, and then there's also physically excluding people.
Right.
So yeah, it's difficult, and I appreciate that brands feel like, but it's difficult, but it's not impossible. You know, if I'm a startup of one, essentially, until very recently, if I can put on a show with 29 disabled models across the board and make it accessible and make it inclusive on a very limited budget, then, you know, there's not actually that excuse that it costs more money or that it's difficult to do. It's easy. You know,
Yeah,
it's a bit of
absolutely.
extra time and you've got to want to do it. But once you build that in, then it's just part of your process.
Exactly. It's like anything, you know, anything that you want to add into your business, you have to create some kind of system for it. And you have to actually, like, okay, the first time you're going to do it, yeah, you have to put more work in. But then once you've done it once, it's just like rinse and repeat. You know, it's not.
Yeah,
It
exactly. And
doesn't
I
have
think, you
to
know,
be.
even if you make a mistake, just, you know, say sorry, learn
Okay.
from it,
Yeah,
and move on. Because no, you know, nobody's perfect. And I'm
exactly.
sure, you know, I have made and will continue to make mistakes, and I'll just try and learn from them, you know, turn it
Yeah,
into a lesson. But, you know, I think we need to sort of everyone needs to give each other a little bit of grace. But I think people have to also start. I think, you know, because disability touches all the intersections. You know, it's the only one that anyone can join at any time as a protected characteristic. So, you know, we're kind of non-disabled people. We kind of in the community we're starting to say are pre-disabled, because eventually they will in some way become disabled. It's very likely that they will, even just by being elderly. You know, not being able to get
yeah.
around as much. You know, if you're lucky enough to live to an older age. So it's in everyone's interest to do this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And how do you envision fashion like of the future?
Well, I mean, there's optimistic me and then there's cynical me. I don't know that I'll see it, you know, in my lifetime. I would like it to be, you know, in the same way that we have tall and petite ranges and curve and maternity wear, that we have inclusive ranges. But I think, you know, there is still, obviously there's space for, you know, rather than having one rail as part of one shop, it being also a whole shop where that's everything in there is like that. So that's kind of my long-term dream, is to have my own bricks and mortar store, really. But I think what I want to see in the industry is, I think models and representation and hiring practices needs to be better. I'd love to see disability normalised, you know, to the point we're not having press coverage because we've done something we should have been doing the whole time anyway. Much like with, you know, racism and everything else, like we shouldn't be getting pats on the back for doing what we should have always been doing. And then seeing high street brands, seeing the high street change, you know, how we welcome consumers and make them feel included in our campaigns and in our spaces, so that it's normalised. That is my long-term goal, is to normalise inclusion, because it, like, disability is mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, what is normal?
Right. I mean, yeah, there's no normal. I'm not sure what that's meant to look or sound or feel like. I don't know. Like, we're all
Right.
these, you know, we're all these odd beings wandering around the earth. I just think we can, you know, support each other a bit more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just like I think about this, I think where is like kindness and love, just
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like, and not looking at other people because they might be slightly different from you in whatever way. You know, whether that's their gender, their sexuality, if they have a disability or not, or the color of their skin. Like, why are we so judgmental and stuck in old mindsets when we're all
Yeah.
just, like you said, odd human beings trying to live this human experience? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, I mean, it's what I find really interesting, that, you know, like that, and I hope it's changing now with, you know, sort of, you can't just hurl online abuse anymore, which is great, or they're trying to clamp down it. But I suppose I don't quite understand the mindset where you would sit and on purpose write something horrible to someone, especially someone maybe that you've never met. You know, and they're still a human, no matter what they do. Well, I say this, actually, there's a fair few people that I'm not sure they are human, but, you know, to take time out of your day to say something horrible to someone else, like, what does that really serve? Who does that help? And, you know, if it was turned back onto you, you'd feel horrible and awful if someone did it. So that whole, you know, treat others as you want to be treated, I think is really important. But yeah, it blows my mind sometimes how nasty people can be, when really, you know, when I think, I can't remember who the quote is from, it's very, very old, but, you know, we don't come into this world hating other people because of what they look like, sound like, feel like, any of that. You know, we are taught it, we teach ourselves to be judgmental and to be horrible to other people. And I think, you know, there needs to be a shift to stop instilling this into children.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely needs to be a shift. Absolutely. Victoria, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a beautiful conversation. I'd love for you to share where people can find you and Unhidden.
So it's unhiddenclothing.com, although we are switching soon to just unhidden.com. Finally bought the domain rights off somebody else. And unhidden.uk on Instagram. I think it's Unhidden Official on TikTok. We are trying to make sure that all of our social handles are the same. It's really difficult to do.
Right.
And Unhidden Fashion on Twitter. But yeah, Instagram's probably where the most things happen. So unhidden.uk on Instagram. And keep your eyes peeled in a certain large fashion magazine next month. And keep an eye on screens as well.
Well, I look forward to these wonderful new projects that you're doing. And thank you once again for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's incredible what you're doing. You're extremely inspiring and very, just like brave as well as like an entrepreneur, solo entrepreneur, and how far you've come. Like, I haven't been following you for that long, but I'm just in awe at, your determination. So congratulations. Yes, you have, and that's amazing, and it's inspiring for every single person. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Ciao, ciao.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please subscribe to the Lou Stokes Podcast. Rate and review in the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in from. I'd be so grateful. Also, check out the show notes to learn more about my guests and learn more about me on my website, www.loustokes.com. Until next time, be inspired, take action, and be the change you want to see in the world.